So by the end of the year, you should have this list down for the most part. And I mean, you should have exposure to all these items already. Anything from allegory going down to tone, right? We call these the basics. And if you have this in your toolkit for APLA, as far as rhetorical devices go, you're pretty much okay. Like there really isn't anything beyond this that you will need. You only go really fancy if you want to go for like an almost absolute sophistication, right? And that's tricky too, because if you're looking for those devices, that could kind of like hinder your speed and time for the actual essay itself. But for today, I want to go over some of the items that are not so basic, a little bit more of the advanced devices here, the fancy ones. And I think I have like 3 slides of this in total, so, sorry, 3 presentations in total, so I'll go over each one, chunking it here. You'll notice a lot of A's in this one, and the next one's like full of other, you know, letter starting devices here. But we'll go from a Chasmus down to plainism, and we'll think about how these work essentially as devices. They're not like difficult to understand, by the way. It's just that we don't really see these common enough compared to something like diction or tone that we would kind of like focus on these devices here. But if you're able to notice them, then, you know, good for you. It's like really good sophistication points to earn for the AP exam. So let's start with the first one. Chasmus. It's a form of irony in which a person feigns indifference to or pretends to refuse something he or she desires. And this is something we'll see a lot more in like allegories. We'll see them a lot in parables. We'll see them in kind of like these more moralistic stories. And Chasmus is kind of like irony where it shows a certain behaviorism, a certain caricature. If you look at this story, I think we talked about this before in class too, was The Wolf and the Grapes, right? It's a old Greek kind of parable here. But basically, you have this wolf who's trying to get these grapes, can't get them, and therefore he blames kind of like the situation, not the situation, he blames the grapes themselves. And he thinks like, oh, well, I mean, I didn't want them anyways, right? That's where the term sour grapes come from. And so in this case, it's the Chasmus that kind of shows the attitude that we shouldn't have about being mad in regards to situations that don't go our way, essentially there. So Chasmus is something we'll see more in, again, allegories and parables. A domination, you'll notice that, like, these terms are really elongated in the names here, and that's why we also don't go over them too much, just because, like, it's not, again, hard to understand, it's just really hard to pronounce sometimes here. But basically, this one is the repetition of words with the same root. The difference lies in one sound or letter. And you'll see this a lot in, like, not titles, kind of like titles, like subtitles of, like, what do you call it, newspapers. You'll see them in, what do you call it, headers. You'll see them in headers, right? Or you'll see them in, like, opening statements. So in this case, if you look at this example here, news is what somebody, somewhere, wants to suppress. All the rest is advertising. And what's happening is the repetition of the root some, and they're trying to kind of like expand it from person to place, right? News is what somebody, person, somewhere. So it's kind of like expanding it there in this case. So think of it kind of like word anaphora, if that makes sense, where we're using the same root of same root to repeat, essentially, to kind of make emphasis or to expand an idea or to like make tangents with it there, with a domination here. Adilton, a rhetorical device that is a form of hyperbole in which exaggeration is taken to a great extreme where it seems impossible. In other words, when hyperbole is magnified to such an extent that is completely unfeasible. So we all know what hyperbole is, right? This one here basically is kind of like hyperbole plus, where if somebody is making a statement, it's something that, it's not even just hyperbole anymore, it's like beyond reality, right? Because we'll say like in hyperbole, we'll say like, I'm so hungry I could eat a whole horse. And I guess you could if you try really hard. But in this example, woman here says, I'd love to. What works best for you? When hell freezes over, when monkeys fly out of my butt. Obviously, these two could not possibly happen. At least I hope not. But anyways, it's kind of like hyperbole, made it more extreme. Anadiplosis. This is more of a syntax type device here. It's a form of repetition in which the last word of one clause or sentence is repeated as the first word of the following clause or sentence. And I know the definition is kind of like weird. It's better to see in action, right? This is a scene that I picked from Gladiator, and it's kind of an older movie. Joaquin Phoenix does a really good job here, making this little line. He says, they call for you, the general who became a slave, the slave who became a gladiator, the gladiator who defied an emperor. Striking story. And the anadiplosis happening here is you'll see at the end of every little like clause, right? There's a sort of not repeat, but it's a repeat. It's a repetition of the word that happened previously, and it carries on to another listing item or another idea following afterwards. And so again, it's more of a syntactical thing, and it's trying to show how like one item transfers to the next, and how it develops and evolves essentially. Antenagog. Sorry, again, these are like really weird definitions or pronunciations. Antenagog. Putting a positive spin on something that is nevertheless acknowledged to be negative or difficult. So it's kind of like when a speaker, and this is like something we'll see more in narratives, right? When a speaker goes through like a hard situation or talking about like a hard situation, and they're trying to make it, again, something more lighthearted, something more positive. They're seeing the bright side of things, essentially, right? So example sentence, I was laid off, but at least I can spend more time with my kids now. And so for this person, they recognize that there is hardship, but they can at least do some good with their life now with this antenagog here. And so sometimes it's trying to like change the mood and tone here. We'll look at this situation again, like I said, more in narratives, but we'll see it oftentimes when the author is trying to like do tone shifts to set the mood. Anthemaria, the intentional misuse of one word's part of speech, such as using a noun for a verb. And so if you look at this comic example, Calvin says, I like to verb words. Hobbes says, what? I take nouns and adjectives and use them as verbs. Remember when access was a thing? Now it's something you do. It got verbed. Verbing weirds language. Maybe we can eventually make language a complete impediment to understanding. And so the thing is, sometimes we'll say like, go Google it, right? And it's like, I mean, Google's a thing. You don't think something with Google, if that makes sense, right? So you're using like a word in its wrong parts of speech, but then your readers will understand it here. And it's usually for more comedic effect. We'll see this a lot more in like, I guess, satire, but it's kind of just a form of more informal diction, if anything. Antiphrases. I keep like going to the next slide, getting like tripped up on these here. Antiphrases. A sentence or phrase that means the opposite of what it appears to say. So it's kind of like a rhetorical irony here, right? It's pretty much verbal irony, essentially. And if you look at this example, let's say it's a court situation, right? And someone who's sitting there says, well, if it isn't the court of racially biased persecution, or as you all put it, the court of law. And this antiphrasis basically is, I'm saying what it isn't, but in doing that, kind of suggests that it is, if that makes sense, right? So I'm kind of like calling out the court indirectly. It's more of an indirect type of irony here. A lot of times you'll see this again in satire. You'll see it oftentimes when someone's trying to poke fun at something here. So antiphrasis, verbal irony, sarcasm. Antonomasia. A descriptive phrase replaces a person's name. Antonomasia can range from lighthearted nicknames to epic names. So if you call someone like a Casanova, for example, we can make that allusion to the movie itself, and that has the kind of like connotation of a romantic, right? So they used to do this a lot in cartoons and such, but they'll say like, calm down, Casanova, right? Like, calm down, lover boy, essentially. This is kind of like an alluding type of name. Sometimes people get nicknames because of their origins or because of their kind of like meme, I guess. So if you think about like Shakespeare, they call him the Bard of Avon because that's where he's from, right? So in literature, if we say like the Bard, it's like, oh, that's Shakespeare because he is the Bard. But then later, if you think about like modern times here, if you say like the Orange Man, it's like, well, we kind of know who that is, you know, like there's only one of that person. So in this case, antonomasia, it is like this sort of descriptive nickname to refer to particular individuals. It's like a replacement of their name in that case. Apporia, where the speaker purports or expresses doubt or perplexity regarding a question. It's feigned, right? And asks the audience how he ought to proceed. So this happens a lot with, advertisements. A lot of times advertisements will kind of like propose a question that they'll ask an audience, like, how should they kind of proceed here? And it's more of like inviting the audience into the brainstorming, but they have an answer already. I think an example, I don't know why I put Carlin. I think there's, Carlin does a lot too. Carlin does a lot of Apporia, but I think a better example, a more kind of like approachable example is Steve Jobs. What he used to do is he would talk about like the phones, right, the iPhones. And he'd be like, well, we don't want this particular issue with the iPhone, so what do we do? What do we do with this situation here? And what he's doing is he's asking this question that kind of like, you know, invites the audience in. It looks like he doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's like kind of lost in thought, but he already has an answer, obviously, right? So it's kind of like a crowd getter. It's kind of something that again, lets you understand the kind of logic that the speaker is about to give you here. Estherimus, the addition of a logically unnecessary word at the beginning of a phrase, or a phrase at the beginning of a sentence to emphasize what follows. And President Obama does this a lot. If you look at any of his speeches, he does a lot of Estherimus where he will interject with like, let me be clear. And he'll say like whatever afterwards, right? So it's kind of like a sentence opener, but you don't need it, obviously, right? It's just wordy, but it's more for emphasis. So it's a form of, again, rhetorical choice, syntactical choice here to just like emphasize and re-emphasize over and over that he wants to be clear. And it's like, well, I mean, we kind of expected you to be clear, so don't need to tell us. Chiasmus, I think I had this on another slide as well, but it's also synonyms with antipole, anti-metabole. So the repetition and or reversal of words or grammatical structure across two phrases. And so this is a tricky one because it's kind of like an equation, essentially, right? If you look at these bottom, I guess, graphs, they kind of show you how the switching of words exists to make more truth. A lot of authors will try to do this because it kind of shows how these two interjectively changed still kind of like creates meaning, right? So how you would do this is if you look at the bottom part here, twist facts to suit theories, not theories to suit facts. And so I'm trying to make the emphasis here where you don't want to, what do you call it? You don't want to twist reality. Sorry, other way around. You want to twist reality to fit theories, right? Because you're kind of like going into the abstract and the unknown, but you don't want to take theories and put them into the world of facts. Because in this case, what you're doing is you're putting like conspiracies and so forth into the actual real world here. And so what Chasmus does is, if you look at that structure, it basically took A over here and interjected where B is, and took B and interjected where A was. So it's kind of like, you know, crisscrossing as you see from this chart here. And a lot of authors would do this again for rhetorical effect and to kind of show how these ideas and these words are linked together, essentially. There's a difference, though, between the two. If you look at chiasmus, we rotate the subjects, right? So if you look at this example, she has all my love, my heart belongs to her. So in this case, what's happening is we are interjecting the ideas, right? She, her, love, heart. And so it's not super like strict. Chiasmus is more flexible, where you can just interject and rotate the subjects. Whereas antipole is more, it's parallel. It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. So it has to be the actual words in this case here, where nice still exists down here from A to B, and then important is now from B to A. So just be careful with that, because, I mean, your reader will kind of generally accept either or if you, you know, kind of like interchangeably use these. Most people do interchangeably use them because like it's like close enough, essentially, right? But if you want it to be like super accurate, it's this breakdown here. Why is this bullet point different from this one? I don't know what happened there. Meiosis, or also litotes. So this is it's not, I know you're probably thinking like biology. No, it's not biology. It's basically a rhetorical understatement. So let me give you an example of my strife. All right, and I think a few of you might know this because you guys play the game as well. It's not a really good example because it's really like obscure, but here you go. So I play this game called Path of Exile, and I've been playing for like 7 years, like since 2014. And in this game is this item here, the Mirror of Calandra. Its drop rate, which means you kill monsters and stuff, right, is less than 0.001%. That means every monster I kill has a 0.001%. It's super rare of an item. And so basically, most people have to play about 5,000 hours to find this item. Or not. I played 7 years, I haven't found one yet, right? So let's say I'm playing with somebody else, right? And they're just killing a few monsters, and they found the Mirror of Calandra, this rare item that took me 7 years that I haven't even found yet. And they say, pretty decent find. And it's like, it's more than just a decent find. It's actually one of the rarest items in the game, if not the rarest. So in this case, it's a rhetorical understatement, right? It's when someone says something to intentionally be understating and to kind of like create kind of a reaction to it there. It's pretty much the same thing as like what you would see in understatement with satire, deflation, essentially, right? And just to finish the story, I've been playing this game for a long time. Like, 2013. Yeah, I've been playing a long time. These are just some of my characters. Like, I've been playing a long, long time. Here's the last one, plainism. Redundant phrases that emphasize the nature of the subject is kind of like restatement slash repetition in some ways. So in this case, if you look at this example, I've had plenty enough of your doubts. It's a true fact. I'm going to give you a free gift. Plenty, enough, same meaning. True, fact, same meaning. Free gift. Same essential meaning here. So plainism, basically redundancy, but again, it's to make an emphasis on the point you're trying to make here. And these are some of the devices that you'll see in the fancier world here. They're called Latinates. They are more Latin-rooted terms, so they're a little bit harder to pronounce, as you saw. But they're good for sophistication, but you don't have to, like, what do you call it? Die trying finding them. There's no, like, need for that, right? So it's nice if you know them, but it's more for impressing and for fun, essentially, here. So this is part 1 of 3 here. The other ones are shorter, but otherwise a nice start to getting some ideas as to what you could look for on the AP exam.